Hello, I am Tim Martin from the Falmouth Genealogical Society in Falmouth, Massachusetts. Our speaker series events are usually the second Saturday of every month at 10 a.m., and today fits that pattern. For those of you who have joined us via Zoom, please be sure and give yourself your correct first and last name. That is what I look at to allow you in from the Zoom waiting room. Today, with the permission of our speaker, we are also doing a YouTube live stream of this talk, which is running as I speak now to the public. We ask that Zoom participants generally keep their microphones muted, and those of you with a keyboard can then hold the space bar down to talk. Zoom users can enter questions at any time as you think of them during this talk using the chat feature. You can also ask questions at the conclusions by voice, and that'll be nice to hear live human beings as well. I will read the submitted questions aloud at the conclusion of the talk. And if you submit a question via chat, please type 3 question marks at the beginning so I can easily identify them as questions for our speaker. I suggest that you all open the chat area now by clicking on the chat icon, usually at the bottom of the screen. So let's get to our speaker. Chief and Elder Paul Gwilawato Bunnell is a charter and lifetime member of the Falmouth Genealogical Society. I've been looking over past issues of our newsletter and find that he was amazingly productive in his approximate 10 years with us. Just do an internet search for Paul J. Bunnell, and you will see the many publications that he has produced. He left the Cape to continue his very productive life in about 1996, and we have recently reconnected with him, much to our benefit. He has done a significant amount of work in many areas of New England history and Native American research and genealogy. And today we have asked Chief Bunnell to talk about the Abenaki people that have lived in northern New England, Quebec, and the Maritimes of Canada. And the title of his talk is Abenaki Hard Road in History. So Chief Bunnell, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, and welcome everybody, and it's glad to be back in Falmouth. And this Zoom process that we've in our tribe has just been experienced and has brought a lot of people together, even more than the people that just live in the close proximities to a physical meeting. A lot of the members from out there in the world are now connected, and I think that's a great tool to have. So with that, I'd like to just say that I want to recognize Eleanor Baldick and Marge Riley on the relationship that I had with them back in the 80s when I had recently got back into the Cape after being exposed to my genealogy in Oregon with my Mormon friends. And they invited me to a seminar that they had at their church. And I sat down and discovered genealogy. They showed me how to fill out the forms, and everything was handwritten back then. And I just fell in love, and it became a disease like we all have been inflicted with. You all know what I mean. And when I came back to the Cape, I started developing all this other stuff going on because my ancestors were loyalists. On my mom's side, it was all French, Canadian, and Quebec, and Acadian. And so I had a rich line that was actually screaming to me to come back home. And that's why I think I'm here back in the Northeast. From being raised in California since 1953. So with that, we got involved to a degree where I started to discover my loyalist ancestry. And then I wanted to hook up as my genealogy knowledge increased, I wanted to hook up with a society. And that's where I met the two ladies that were becoming my friends. And the struggle of Falmouth Genealogical Society in the early years. And I did the newsletter for a short time as well as I could do it because I had no experience and all that, but we had to all fill our hats, as we all know we do in the societies. Everybody worked together, and then Marge Gibson came in and she did a wonderful, took over the newsletter and did that for quite a few years. And it just started growing. And then we got involved with the invitation to join NERC. And that was a big decision to make at that time. And we saw an opportunity to raise money, getting a piece of the pie and conducting it. And that actually flourished even more my genealogical experiences, because I was in the process of writing my first book on Thunder over New England on my loyalist. And then from there, we started developing these conferences to where I was a vendor. I had my books, and at that time, I probably had 10 books going. I was doing research books mostly on the loyalist. And then I had a 2-year program that I was doing all the villages of Barnstable, the cemeteries. And I physically did that year round for 2 years in the snow, the heat, the bugs, and all that, and put together a wonderful book that the Cemetery Commission uses it all the time. And it's still in print and it's going well. And then I did another one dedicated to Barnstable too, was the Barnstable House and the hauntings that lived there. And that was a very interesting book. It actually got me on TV several times too, on some of the ghost programs. So that's been exciting. So from there, I developed into that. And I worked at Auget and Mashpee, and got to know a lot of Wampanoag friends, Portuguese friends there, and we became very close. And as I was developing this, I picked up the BYU classes that were being conducted and authorized and supervised at Sturgis Library. And at that point, I was going for my associate's degree in genealogy, and I covered all the classes needed for the associate's degrees in the genealogy field. And it was just all exciting. And it just started building on my experience. And I put my shingle out and was helping other loyalists find their things that they needed to connect them to those people that had to leave the country, and the records were all broken up and they had to search. So I became kind of an expert in that area, helping to connect loyalist people to their families that went to Canada. With that, I started aiming towards the French side of my family. And with that there, I started seeing single names with married to the French people in my family, the direct ancestors. They would have wives with no last names. And I started seeing this and different peculiar things like making snowshoes or baskets and things like that, that would start telling me there was something different about these people that married into my French line. With that, I started discovering I had all this Native American history and ancestors in my line that today is brought up to 100 ancestors, direct ancestors that I have. So it became very rich. So now I've got two very exciting fields, the loyalist and the Native American fields that I got involved with. So I started pumping out books to help the Native Americans find their connections, because I discovered they had the same problem with all the extermination and different things that happened to our culture in that field. So with that, we had quite a bit of eye-opening events, and they, I guess we could start probably with the screen, Tim, if you want to put the first one up. Yeah, so what had happened was very similar to what I experienced on the Cape with seeking out friends and fellow researchers like it was at Falmouth. I ended up looking for a tribe that I needed to associate with to learn more, because a lot of my ancestors were driven underground, just like a lot of the others were. And my parents never mentioned anything about it. I don't even know if my parents knew, because unfortunately, when I found all this tradition and culture in my family, they had passed on. Whether my grandfather and grandmother knew, I think they might have, and they just kept it quiet, because a lot of things that they were doing in their family, cooking, habits they were doing, now I see in the Native community, and that's what they were doing. And I know through the years, the Acadians, they're quite mixed anyway, because they merged in with the natives. Every time the Northeast went through a changeover between English or French during those struggles, the Acadia and Quebec area, mostly Acadia though, changed hands 4 or 5 times, and up until 1755, till finally when the British, controlled the whole area, finally. So every time this happened, the natives would go into the woods, and the French would go with them when the English came. And some of the French were sent out back to France, or they escaped back to France. But the ones that went in the woods, that's where they intermixed. And that's where you get your Métis mix of the Native Americans with the Micmac and Abenaki and all the Algonquin connected Wabanaki Confederacy people. So when I had all this going on with me and helping other people, I had my shingle out, but I never really charged much. I was enjoying the challenge of finding these people's disconnect. So when I got to finding the Kawasak, at that time they were in Newbury and Haverhill, New Hampshire, and Newbury, Vermont, right on the river there, up in the north. I hooked up with that group and joined. And they had 2 chiefs, one in New Hampshire and one in the Worcester area in Massachusetts. So like our tradition of the Abenaki, we were nomadic. And the way we are today, we're spread out all over the place, mostly due to the economics and the way we live today. Our 400 members are scattered all over the United States and Canada. So we have a big network. We break it down into regions and everything. And if you could change the screen, Tim. This is today, this is our official name, where it used to be spelt with just the C-O, Kawasak. Today, one of the chiefs that we had when I joined, excuse me, around 2005, 2006, he did some research and found out that the actual proper name is the K. the Cowassaq that way, or Cowassaq. It depends how you spell it and pronounce it. So we had voted in to change the name right around the time, that I came on board, about a year or so after. When I did come on board, the tribes in Vermont mostly were in chaos, a lot of inner fighting and internal problems even. And they seized upon my experience in genealogy, because what they needed to do was to clean up the membership that had a mix of non-members or non-native and native. And that was kind of the makeup of the whole picture in Vermont and some in New Hampshire, where they said, here, you get the genealogy and you get to fix it. So I took it on like I always do. People give me a job, I ended up doing it. I never say no. And so what I found out, we had like 5 or 6 members, the chiefs and elders and stuff. They all had their block of numbers and their membership cards, and they were giving them out like candy to whoever they wanted to. So it was out of control. And once I gathered all that information and records that they had, pulled it back, and then made one system and created our administration that we have even today, where we have our archives centered, under my care, but it's still in one place, not spread out to where people can abuse the system by bringing in friends or whatever, and having better control. And we have our application system now where every single member coming in has a native connection in blood. And we're very proud of that. So we actually, when I sign in some of the people, their applications and accept them, they're accepted by a registration. We register them as an official Native American. We don't go by blood quotum. That's a government tactic that they use for eugenics by eliminating tribals, bloodlines. And if you stop and think, if they say, well, you need 25% Native American to be recognized or get this and that, eventually that 25% is going to go down because we're all intermixing every day. So the populations will only go down in due time, and then they get the claim that there is no Indian. And that's not true, because we don't get rid of our DNA, as we all know. The DNA is there forever. In fact, some of our European lines that we have Neanderthal in there, and they're just discovering that. So it's an exciting thing, but you cannot get rid of your DNA. So we tend to, if you got unfortunately, we can only go by paper trail to register people. So we can only get to the late 1500s to 1600s at the best. And then after that, the native line is hard to, you can't trace it. So we do our best, and we bring in all the people as registered native blood. Our Constitution requires that we do bring in outside people with native blood. So we have a lot of people from the Southeast. We have members that are Cajun, which are Acadian, because that's where they came from. So that's what made us spread out even more. We have over 100 members in Vermont, and we have about 70 in New Hampshire and 70 in Massachusetts. So our strong point is still in our traditional territory. If you want to turn the screen to the next page, Tim. Yes, our traditional territory is Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and the Acadia area is South Quebec and northern Massachusetts is our strong points. And then, of course, just about all of Acadia, Newfoundland down through Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. And again, a lot of the other tribes are mixed in there, like the Micmac and Maliseet and different other groups. And then into Maine, it's all related to the Abenaki, and you've got your Penobscot. In New Hampshire, there's the Pennacook. And of course, the common language area that we all speak is very large. And on the map, you can see that darkened area. That is the common Algonquin language group. That means a lot of our languages that we have in each tribe in those areas are similar, not the same, but similar, the way we break it down. And so our Wampanoag friends on the Cape are part of the Algonquin Common Language Group too, and so are the some of the people in the Carolinas and Virginia, all the way down that far. Okay, if we can go to the next one. We lived in wigwams. I always make a mistake and use the word wiki-ups, because when I was brought up out west and learning the Spanish tilt of things out there and the missions, and we had the San Fernando mission where close by where I lived, and I loved going there all the time. I would flip back in time, and some of the school projects we had were making like the adobe bricks that they made the mission out of, you know, the straw and the red clay and everything. And I remember those very clearly as a young kid putting that together. And then I'd used to go to the mission and just kind of like shoot back in time. And that Indian blood was in me the whole time, just saying, you know, growing up, we played cowboy and Indians, and I was always the Indians. Of course, I always got shot, but that was the tradition. And we were always had that around us, but I didn't realize how much it meant. And then, you know, I just started developing as I got older, going hiking in the mountains and looking for gold mines and silver mines and the ghost towns and the deserts and all these different things. And I got a metal detector, and I spent 30, 40 years just doing that on the weekends and searching all over the place for history. And a lot of that, of course, was Native and the Western cowboy and miner type stuff that I got involved with out there and enjoyed that. But the villages here are different, not by much, because like I said, the wiki-up and the wigwams are almost identical. They're made with the smaller branch trees bent over and then covered with bark or sometimes hide. You know, they look like the picture there. The next slide, Tim, if you could. In our area in the Northeast, they also have, and this goes all the way up to the Huron people too, and the Iroquois and Mohawk, is the longhouse. And this here was a very popular family house because you could get a whole family in there and extended family too. And the way they're constructed is down the middle is where all the fires are. And of course, there's vents on the top of the roof. But down the middle, you'd have each family would be like a stall that you'd find in a horse stall. Like everybody had their stall they lived in, and it was a 2-story stall. And down the middle was where they had their cooking and their fire, and each family had that, went right down the center of the longhouse. and then install on the bottom section, excuse me, they that's where they did all their work, preparing their meals, working with their hides and things like that. And then in the upper level is where they stored things and slept. They slept also in the lower level, but there was just like like a little apartment in a way. And they lined all the way down one side and came up all the other side. And this is how they lived through the winters, which were very good because it kept them all together. Next slide. Okay, and the dress is very, very different compared to out west with the big, huge headdress that they had, the loincloths and different little things like that. In the Northeast, some of the designs get kind of elaborate, almost like a Portuguese style, you know, with the flowers and all these different things that are put on their dresses and blouses, like this one here shown, is very elaborate, a lot of work. And they had leggings. I have a pair of leggings that I use. I don't like it that much because it's so cumbersome, but that's how they dressed. And the Abenaki women would wrap deerskin skirts around them. They also had, for cool weather, they had blouses that fit like a poncho. And let's see, the chief's hat. Traditionally in the Northeast, you've got a chief's hat that looks like this, and then my first hat. This is another style. I'll bring it out. This is the other style. Oh, what happened?
I'm just giving the large screen to you so we can fully see your hats.
Okay, I'm still looking on the corner here, but I think you guys can see it. As you can see, the feathers on mine that I'm wearing go straight up, and that was one of our members, Dan, here, that made that just recently with me. Beautiful beadwork and everything. And then this style here is the feathers laying down, and with the decorative around the edges, and you wear that hat. And the feathers, the tradition that comes behind the feathers is that they're gifted. And normally you don't add a feather unless somebody gives you a feather, or you earn the feather. In other words, if there was a campaign or something that went on, then you'd add a feather. So after a while, you can have a pretty bushy head. But I love both my hats. They're very nice, and I trade them off, wear one time and another time. So if we can go back to the slide and then go to the next one. Okay, the Abenakis, being a nomadic group, traveled all around, and a lot of their means of eating depended on the season. So, you know, they ate fish, wild plants, the animals, the corn. They grew the Three Sisters Garden, which is corn, squash, and beans. And that's remarkable. The first time I ever seen that done, I'm just amazed by it. You know, you plant the corn and the corn stalk grows and put certain nutrients in the ground, and then you plant right at the base your beans, and the beans crawl up the stalk, and that also puts certain nutrients in the ground to complement each other. And then when you plant the squash crawls on the ground all around and helps hold in the moisture when things get kind of tough. And it's just amazing. All three work together, and they become very successful. And I'd like to know more of where it came from, because I did hear some stories that they were down in Mexico also. So they applied this from all over. So some of these things migrated north to where we picked them up. And I'd like to just learn more on that as we go, because it's an interesting story how they work together. And of course, we hunted moose, bear, deer, and the caribou, and then small animals that were easier to catch. These are the things that we did. But seasonally, what we did is one part of the year we'd end up on the coast doing the shell fishing. And I think we can go to the next screen, I think. Yeah, the shell fishing, and then another part of the year would go to the mountains and the forest, and then along the rivers where there was an overflow of the soils and things that made the soil rich. That's where we had our gardening and our fishing in the river also. So it depended on the season. That's where we went. We were very supernatural. We believe that we come from the ash tree. That's some of the traditions that we have. Some of the mountains were formed by giants that laid down. These are all different. The stories are just wonderful. If you've ever attended Native American storytelling, they're very good, and they're very exciting. I attended one a couple years ago at Mount Kearsarge, the museum there, the Abenaki Museum, and it was a full day in February where it was snow on the ground, and we had probably 10 or 15 poets and storytellers that showed up from all over New England, and it was just a great day of all these stories that they told, and it was a very good program. It was really very good. And then, of course, we believe a lot of times that we turn into animals or different spirits. Dancing was very important to our culture, and including during marriages and deaths. And then the tradition of a year later, you're expected that your spouse would be moved on and you can look for another spouse. So it was kind of basic of what we do today on a loose basis, in society. Okay, if you can change. This is where we just cover some of the spring and the fishing and the salmon and the eels. The dugout canoes, a lot of those canoes are done with bark too, and they're just beautiful work. I've seen a few. Some are actually dug right out of the tree, a big old tree, and they've spent a long time just digging it out with their tools. Others are framed and put together with the bark of the tree. It's very, very nice stuff. Beautiful to see. Okay, and then of course the big thing during the winter and everything is the storytelling. Men and women would tell their stories of whether hunting or cooking or doing things around the society that we had that is mostly run by the women. The women are the center of the tribe, and they rule the roost. You have the clan mothers that's ahead of the clans, the family clans, and then you have the elders, which are mixed, male female, in the tribe, and then you also have the council. So there is a layer of government that we have that works very well. And of course, in the case of the Iroquois, Washington, President Washington actually took a lot of their ideas that they had in their government and voting and everything, and applied that and put it into the Constitution. So there are some Native American things that are actually part of our Constitution in America. Okay, next slide. Okay, yeah, the farmers, the women would get out there and do that too, along with the childcare and the cooking. So that was a big thing. And you can see the elaborate dress that they had in the Northeast. Not sure about the feather on the head. That's something I don't think is Northeast, I don't believe. A lot of their headdresses were, for women, were pointed materials sticking straight up, and then elaborate designs and features that were on them, like their dress there. They're very bright and big. And then again, like a poncho thing over their body too, that was full of designs and flowers and things. And we went into storytelling, we got that. And the chiefs they can be women and men. There's still a controversy over whether a woman can be part of a drum group, the big drum group. That's usually taboo. They can play hand drums. Some of the groups will allow women to come in, and the big drum groups that you see at the powwows, they have they can't be in there. And we've actually had trying to plan our powwows around this virus. We keep having to cancel. We've had one group that comes out of Maine, very popular group, and the first thing they came out said, if you've got any other drum groups and they got women in there, we're not coming. So there's still a controversy over that, because traditionally that was a man's thing. When it came to drums, before drums, we actually took a stick and banged it on a trunk of a tree, or a tree laying down. And especially if you got a tree that was hollow, that's how the first drumming in the Northeast, at least, was conducted. And then after that, the high drums came in and was extremely popular and took over there. Okay, next screen. We were very active in the French and the Indian Wars, as you know, and again, connected to mostly the French. We were allied with them all the way up through, Montreal and Quebec and all that. And we conducted raids down into Massachusetts, Haverhill, and all those places that we wanted to disrupt the British. And one of our techniques was stealing people, abducting them, and taking them north and turning them over to the French, or in some cases, we would try to keep them in our tribe in inner relations, and sometimes they would stay. They'd find that the living conditions with the Indians and the family unit was so much better that they ended up staying. A lot of young people, like we have a history of the one family that was chiefs, and there were white Abenaki chiefs, and they were the first one was actually kidnapped out of Massachusetts. So we have a lot of mix that comes in through the abductions of mostly Abenaki that went down and conducted those raids. Excuse me. And next screen. Another popular practice that we had that is strictly, I think, Abenaki, is the maple syrup. And we made good candy, and we've had some members in our tribe that still do the traditional way instead of all the metal pots and pans and things that they use. They still do some of the traditional ways using the wood and cooking it. And I've tasted the difference. And boy, maple syrup is great, but boy, if you get the traditional maple syrup, there is a richer flavor, and it's just so much better. We used to have that with our snow snake games. Every February, we'd have snow snake games and freeze our butts off, excuse my French. And I just had a lot of fun. And what you do in a snow snake game, which is unique, I've got a few here that I made for my grandkids. You get a pile of snow, a whole pile, running it down through a field, maybe 100, 200 yards long. And then you get a log and you put it on the top and drag the log on the top of that pile until you got like an alley, like you see in a bowling alley, where the ball comes down, and it forms that groove going that far down, 100, 200 yards. Then you have a stick. It's just a plain stick, and everybody designs their own stick. Some have a snake head, some are pointed, some have just painted designs on them, and you make your own snow snake. That's what the snow snake is. And what everybody does is, and it's mostly a kid's game, but today the adults do it and everything. You take the stick and you throw it down like you do almost bowling, and you go as far as it can down the runner, and the furthest one is the one that wins the event. And what we would do is we'd give away bottled maple syrup and different other prizes for the kids, things like that. Once the stick would get down to the end, the snake, then you'd pick the snake up and stick it in that ground on the snow to mark where they finished. And then the next person would come in and run it down, and that's how the competition would go. And we always seemed to pick February because we figured that's when the snow would be still there on the ground, if not still falling. And a lot of times you have a nice, good fire going on to keep warm. So the hardwood in the forest was hard to cut because, in most cases we only had stone and very, very crude things that we use for axes. So a lot of our houses were made with the thinner poplar trees, or birch trees, or whatever we could find. Okay, if you could change. The bad times that came to us was at the first encounters when the Europeans came to America and to South America and Central America. There was over 100 million people living at that time in the Americas, Native Americans, and over 90% of them died from mostly smallpox, measles, the flu, and I think there was some others in there too that the Europeans brought with them because the natives didn't have anything to fight back. Their resistance was not made to fight that stuff off. So by 1990, there was only about 237,000 Native Americans that were alive in this country. So from 100 million in the Americas down to that's pretty bad. Next. During the French and Indian Wars, the scalps became a monetary gain for the Europeans. The governments were offering $130 a pound for males and 50 pounds for females and children. This was pretty harsh. It caused a lot of little mob type groups going out into the woods looking for any Indians and killing them, bringing back their scalps. A lot of the times you'd have to go to Boston and get the refunded money, and they paid that way. Hannah Dustin, the picture that you see there in the photo, was a very notorious lady that was abducted from Haverhill, Mass, and she had a baby, very young baby, just born, and a few other people were taken, and the Abenaki took them and was heading north to get up to Canada and trade them in. And somewhere along the line in mid New Hampshire, they were all sleeping. And well, just before that, the rumor has it that the baby was crying, and the settlers were catching up to him, and the natives were, it was told that somebody took the baby and killed the baby to keep it quiet. And of course, that's what caused the infuriation of Hannah Dustin. And they woke up that night, and like a lot of the Indian parties, they traveled with women and children themselves, native children and women. So they were all sleeping, and Hannah Dustin got the others captives, got them loose, and got a hold of some weapons, and they killed all the warriors, and they began to kill all the children and the women that were traveling with them also, and then started fleeing back south. But before she did that, she scalped every one of them. And she took the scalps to Boston and got her bounty that she collected from that. And this picture here is from the Haverhill Park in Massachusetts. She's holding her hatchet. I believe in the other hand, there might be a scalp, or used to be a scalp. And then in New Hampshire, where the event took place, there's another statue that's a little more graphic, and I think that one has the scalps hanging. And there is a Pennacook group in New Hampshire that that chief and his wife are on a crusade to have the Abenaki side of the story put on the site that's in New Hampshire. And I think they're even in the process of trying to get other Abenaki sites where there was a massacre or something by a Stark or one of those other people, Rogers group, and those people that went in and did a lot of massacring villages unarmed. So they want to make sure wherever these plaques and signs are, they want to put up a plaque or something saying the side of the, correcting history. Because unfortunately, like even with the case of my loyalist ancestors, there's more written about the victors, not the losers. So they're in that crusade, and we're backing that. We think it should be done. The story should be told. And in fact, in one situation with a new member in our tribe, ironically, after I helped him out with his genealogy and working it all out, it ends up being, he had his Abenaki lines proven. So he has his Abenaki blood, along with some others, I think Micmac too, but he has Abenaki. But what I found along the way, he's also a direct descendant of Hannah Dustin. So it it was quite the thing to have a member that has both sides of this situation. And it's interesting, but historically, it should be explained properly. The next slide, please. Okay, it gets darker, I'm sorry, but the eugenics program in Vermont was a very dark part of the history. Vermont wasn't the only place. I think the Carolinas did things, and there was other states that did the same thing around the same period between the 1920s and 30s, to where everybody wanted to make the race more pure. And it was nothing more racist than that. In the case of Vermont, the zoological professor, Dr. Henry Perkins, championed the idea of the eugenics survey in 1925. And they did censuses going up into the 30s and everything, looking for people that either lived like a pauper, was colored, was Indian, which at that time we were even called gypsies. They collected the information on these people, and then eventually, I think it's done. Can you go to the next slide? I think, were we still talking about? Yeah. So this is what happened in Vermont. Once they started going, they started collecting these people, taking them to doctors. And of course, a lot of these people were backwoods Vermonters. They didn't know too much. They didn't have much education. And they started getting sterilized. And the record really stands at 253, but it's a lot bigger than that. That's not reported. And it was performed in, from about 33 to 63, but we have records that it went up into the 70s. So we actually have a couple of members that have been sterilized. They're up in age, and that still exists. So it's kind of an eye opener for us that we have to live with. It was a terrible situation. They'd look for even the French Canadians and started labeling them in Vermont as candidates. And of course, the black, the handicap, anybody that was mentally handicapped, those are the ones that they'd sterilize too. Okay, next, please. Okay, that goes from there. Let me see if I missed something before I go into this one. Let's see. Yes, we're involved with, a few years back, I got contacted by the Keene State, the college there, and in Keene, New Hampshire. And they had enough foresight. I have to really congratulate the man the director of the library there, that he got a hold of me to ask for a blessing or permission to extend their library, which was a Holocaust library, and they were expanding it. And of course, part of that would just not be the Jewish Holocaust, it would be the eugenics and the sterilization and racism and the black situation and any racism at all. They had that extension plan. But knowing the history of Keene had a large settlement of Abenaki there in the little rivers that connect through Keene and then run off into the Connecticut down the road some. So they had some, I think his name is Goodbye. He's an archaeologist. They discovered this years ago, and he's come in, he still does lectures on them today. He's out of the college there in New Hampshire, and I've seen him speak. After I moved to New Hampshire, he put on a good presentation, but I didn't realize that the community in Keene was so big. And that was that was an eye opener. And what had happened was shortly after I got a hold of, they contacted me from the Keene State to do this permission thing, because he was recognizing that they might be sitting on ancestral land or even graves or whatever of our people. And so he was nice enough to ask us, what can he do to like get permission from our ancestors? And you just don't hear that from everybody. So I was really honored by that. And I said that I would have a ceremony if that's what he wanted, and get permission before the construction. And he said yes. And gee, they made a big deal out of it. I had a couple of drummers come, and then I brought my smudging equipment and performed a blessing there, and asking our ancestors if it was okay if they would extend this building. And no, there must have been 100, 200 people that showed up. The president of the college, and then a state senator, I think, and just a lot of press and everything, and that hit the newspapers. At that point, I got a good answer from them. They got approved. The following year, the building was built. They had the ribbon cutting ceremony, and it just turned out to be just a wonderful thing. Now on this slide that we have, we were also confronted by this family in Claremont, New Hampshire, which is north of me, where Keene was south of me. I was kind of like in the middle. But in Claremont, New Hampshire, by the bridge that goes over to Vermont, they had an archaeological dig, and they discovered several wigwam settlements there. I think there's a record of a longhouse too. I'm not sure, foundation or something. And it was researched hastily because they were building the bridge, and they kind of moved these guys in quick and said, if you finish up real quick because the bridge is going to be on top of this. So it's kind of so-so, but there is a site there. It's not marked, and I'd like to see more recognition there, but it's in Claremont, and I was just homing in on that. At the same time, the Black Lives Matters thing blew up in our face last year with all the protesting and everything going on. Well, this family, Jean Kennedy and her husband Rick Bascom, they have a couple of lots of land in Claremont, and they got together with their girls. They have, I think, four daughters, I believe. They sat down with them, and they said, we want to do something with all this that's going on the news, and all this racial strife and everything, but we want to do it for the Native Americans. So they said, what do you think about donating one of our pieces of property to a tribe? And the girls all jumped for it. They said, yeah, that would be great. So they just looked on the internet and found me and saw our tribe, all the information, and contacted me. And they just said, we have these two lots. We feel that these things should come back to the Native Americans. And it was one of our goals. I had just been reelected last May on my second 7-year term as chief. And one of the goals we had there that I said was, we need to strive now to get some land and get rooted to in our traditional homeland. And it was a matter of like a couple of months after that, they contacted me. So it was just a whirlwind affair. And it's only 11 acres, but it's really nice. It's just up the street from the hospital in Claremont. And It's all wooded back area of woods, and it has a pond which can run dry. It's kind of a seasonal thing, but right now it's flooded pretty good. And so it's a wetlands, and we picked that particular lot. The other one had a high water table. We figured that would have been a little problem. So we picked that one out of the two that they had. And it was presented to our corporate part of our tribe, the Kawasaki of Turtle Island, Inc. And that's a 501c3 that we have. And went through a ceremony. And on that ceremony, I don't know if the next slide has that, Tim. I'm not sure. Yeah. So we had on the ceremony at the realtor and the lawyer's office, the couple gave us a cedar tree, which is one of our sacred trees. It's not like the ash or the other trees, but they are sacred tree to us. So and they got the eastern one, which is the one that survives the winters best. So they gifted that after the signing. And I got together with our war chief, David Nephew. That's him there in the picture with me. And we had a digging. We planted it last fall. And that's it right behind him, that little yellow thing. And they had an insurance policy put on it and everything. If it died, but we were praying it wouldn't, because it was the first gift that we've gotten, and it meant a lot to us. So the winter went through, and then on March 3rd, we decided to have an awakening ceremony. Well, it just happened that the Keene State, the library there, was having a lecture, a Native American lecture by a very well-known speaker, and in fact, she was awarded the Freedom Medal of Honor from Obama, and she was going to be a lecturer, and they wanted me to do something from our tribe to be in front of her, just to honor something from our area. And we had this planned, and I said, well, gee, we're going to have an awakening. We could do that. And they had the film crew and everything. They came out on March 3rd, and we performed a blessing. We discovered the tree was alive. It's doing well. It's starting to turn green. And in fact, about a week or so ago, I planted some daffodils and some other bulbs around it, to give it some style. So they're starting to bloom now too. And the town found out about it, and they wanted to come out too. So a lot of the city officials came out, along with the newspaper people, the Eagle Times, Claremont, and it just became a big to-do. And so we had the college there, and then the officials from the city, and they took part in our simple little ceremony that lasted not too long. And just to the left of me there, right up when we started to do the blessing, David had noticed a deer came right up and wanted to see what was going on. And so it was kind of nice to see what we plan to do with the land. And I think that might be the next slide, Tim. Oh, that's the newspaper article, yeah. And the Keene State, that's the Cohen Holocaust and Eugenics Library. And that was the front page, which shocked the heck out of us. We didn't realize it was going to be that big of an article, and it was just wonderful. and that's me blessing the tree. The tree's there off to the right, and David was playing the drum during the ceremony. So if you go to the next screen, yes, the plans that we have, which was very appropriate when we had a little deer come up and pay us a visit, and hopefully wishing us well, is we want our nation center, but we also want a nature center to preserve the woods that are there and the watershed that's there. And we want to construct a 2,000 square foot center for our library, our archives, our museum, and a learning center, and open to the public. It's just not a tribal center. And our whole effort is to preserve the land and the nature and education for all that can come there. We hope that eventually we'll get the kids bus there from the schools and have nature walks after we put in paths and everything. So we're in the grant process right now of searching for the money to that will build all this, and we have it broken down into several phases, to put the driveway in better and the parking area, and then up on a hill is where the building will go. And then a real big long shot is the hospital owns 40 acres behind us, and they have done nothing with it. So one of our dreams is to ask them if we could somehow either take that land and then use our 501 to take a tax write-off on it, or go into some kind of cooperation to where we can manage that land and keep it natural and protected for the animals and the people that want to go there. And we're planning to label the trees, special trees and bushes, and areas that will educate people. We're going to plant our sweetgrass there by the pond. We have a wetlands people that are waiting to come in once they get a grant that will tell us what we need to do to clean it up, because some people have dumped some things years ago there, and we have to do some cleanup. And we have plans for 2 turtles that are endangered in New Hampshire, and we're going to get a hold of a couple of them and put them in there and hopefully save them. And different other things that we plan to do. We're already in cooperation with a nature group, conservation group that is in the Claremont area. Had a nice long discussion, and we're going there not this week, but the week after, on a tour of their nature center, and they have endangered seeds that they have in their library, and they're claiming they're going to give them, some of them, to us to plant in our area. So we're hoping to cooperate quite a bit. So these things are just exciting as can be. And right down the street, there's a huge park with a stadium and everything. And that's probably where we're going to end up doing our powwows in the future. Right now, we have a powwow planned to where I live here in Alstead, and that's next June, because we had to push it back again for the 3rd time because of the virus. So the town has approved next June, and we're going to do that here. But the facilities in Claremont are just huge, and everybody are so receptive, and they're excited about us coming into town. And it's just been a overwhelming experience for us. It's just, our heads are spinning. And then I just heard from the hospital just the other day. I haven't even shared this with my people yet, but they said they don't have plans right now to sell, but they want to hear from us right away, because there might be an idea of somehow granting some kind of access, just like what I had mentioned, that could be possible for a guardianship of the land or something. So that's kind of encouraging there. So we hope to move forward with that. I think, Tim, was that the last slide? Oh, yes. That's the last slide. So with that, glad to answer any questions. We've got a couple minutes, I guess, is still left. And I just appreciate everybody, giving us your interest and everything. And it's just, again, it's great to be back where I started.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's amazing, isn't it? How much, after you left Falmouth, how much has happened? You were a productive guy here.
Yeah.
But then what even unfolded in your life since then is astonishing as well. And this is certainly an example of, sometimes when we have speakers, I say to them something like, tell us what we need to hear.
Yeah.
And this is an example of that kind of talk. I'm thankful that you have stepped up to the challenge of talking to us about all of it.
It's been an exciting road for me because it's been, my life's been in stages, it seems like, and it's gone through from, coming from here in the East in Amesbury and then going out West and going through life there up until I married and have my children and then bringing them back home.
So what I'll say here is, so anyone who wants to ask questions verbally, certainly feel welcome to do that now. Just unmute yourself. You could hold, if you have a keyboard, you could hold your space bar down, but some other way, unmute yourself. Or some of you who knew Paul want to say hi to him and see if he recognizes you, that's also welcome. So anyone else want to ask a question or make a comment?
This is Cynthia. I have a question. Can you hear me?
Oh,
Yes.
Hi, Cynthia.
Hey, Paul. The 25% blood rule is very disturbing. And
Yeah.
I know that many of the Native American tribes buy into that. Are they buying into their own extinction?
I think they are. In fact, I was in a lecture, a very good lecture that the tribe in the Carolinas was having on coming from Arizona state, where they were students. And I guess what they were doing for their degree was to put this thing together about the history of the tribes there. And they went through all this stuff. And I found it very shocking that when they mentioned that North Carolina State was a university, I think it is, way ahead of their time, bringing in Native Americans as students and had a great program for Native Americans. And I thought, gee, that's wonderful, everything. But then they said you had to have 10% or more of your blood to even be accepted. And see, there it is again. Now, I know 10% is lower, but the thing is, it's still designed that the ones with 8% not going to get in.
Yeah, and you might share with them the story one of our members told about being challenged by the Census Bureau.
Oh, yes, that just happened recently. One of our members in Minnesota, he got a call from the Census Bureau up there. Now the census is already over, but they got a call and they said, hey, you've got Native American. And I don't know if they went by his name or not, because it was an English sounding name, because I don't think they know him at all. And they said, you put down Native American, you're something else. Why don't you put that down? And he said, well, no, I'm choosing to declare my Native American heritage. which that's what I do, and they were upset about it and said, you can't do that. And I think they ended up hanging up on each other, but he did file complaints later that we encouraged him to, get a hold of the Census Bureau and file a complaint that these people were interfering on what he's putting down on his census. And that's no. That's just absolute. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's some of the racist stuff that goes on, and it's not right.
Yeah, I decided to sign up for 2020 as a enumerator. And I can tell you that question back was definitely not in the playbook.
Yeah.
That was not, that's.
I mean, he was shocked because he'd never had that happen in his life,
Yeah, I was on a heart failure call yesterday when they were talking about minorities and the importance of reaching out to them. And guess which group was not talked about at all?
I bet.
Yeah. And so I pointed that out. And I said, what's going on? Is this a purposeful omission, or do you just not know? And the speaker said, oh my gosh, I will look into that. So I think our voice is really important in everyday things like that in the past I didn't think about.
Yeah, I think the Native American community is so laid back and keeping quiet that is hurting, because, you've got the Black community out there screaming and yelling, and they're making a good inway into this. But again, at least, and I'm not downing any Black people at all, at least they were kept because they were a commodity. They were a piece of property, which was terrible. Us, we were designed to get rid of, exterminated. And that, there's quite a difference. And like I say, 100 million people used to be here, and at least 100 million. And they're all gone. I mean, this place was populated very heavily, and the Europeans came and suddenly discovered it. They conquered it. That's all they did. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a wonderful talk.
Oh, there she is. I saw Eleanor's name. Hi, Eleanor.
Hi, I don't know why I can't get unmuted, but I want to thank you, number one, for all the compliments.
Oh, you are a doll. You and Marge are just, you're the light behind the Falmouth Genealogical Society.
Along with you, don't you forget it. But
Here's so much fun, though, as it grew.
Here's my question, is that the family always said that there was Indian blood in us on my mother's side. And I have yet to prove it, but I still think that they were, and I haven't been able to find the answer to that.
Now, if I remember right, the Baltic, that's French, isn't it?
That's French, but my mother's side was the French side.
Yeah.
And anyway, they always said that the great grandmother was Indian, and they didn't like her. They made a big deal about that.
Yeah.
And on my husband's side, I think there was Indian too. I'm not sure, but I'd love to prove that my great grandmother was part Indian.
Yeah, you should get a hold of me by email if you got my email, and I'll do some searching for you. If you're running into French going to Canada, there's a very big chance that you've got native blood, and that's just the way it was, because the French did not discriminate as much as the British. The English, they intermixed, they accepted them. And that's what happened in Canada mostly.
I thought your talk was exceptional, and I really, really enjoyed your talk, and we found a lot of interesting, interesting things that happened there. And I've always wanted to be part Indian.
Yeah, well, get a hold of me, you might be.
Well, thank you, Paul. It was wonderful.
Oh, and thank you, and bless you.
Chief Paul?
Yeah.
It's Carol.
Hi,
Thank
Carol.
you. I missed part of it because I had trouble getting on, but I'm here.
Well, Tim said he's going to record it, so hopefully we can, with their permission, is post it at our site or have it available on our YouTube site.
Excellent, excellent.
That would be wonderful.
Yes, it would. Thank
Yeah.
you.
You're welcome.
Chief, this is Gary. Hi. I just got a quick question. You mentioned the intermixing of the French and Native in Canada, and it was very prevalent. And I was kind of wondering, is there any repercussion for a woman who might have married a white guy in the actual tribe back when they were intermixing?
There's discrimination on both sides. Sometimes they didn't want outsiders, coming in, and it happened. I can't say it didn't. It was just something that happens in every mix of race. Some of the families don't want it. Sometimes they're threatened. So it's true that happens.
So it was basically up to the chief at the time whether or not the woman would be excommunicated from the tribe. Basically,
up to the chief and sometimes the clan mothers of the family itself, and they would rule whether they didn't want that to happen. In the case of a male marrying within another tribe, he has to leave his tribe and go live with her tribe. And that's how that was. Now, how it was actually done with a European male or female, it would just be whether they were hurt. That had to play a big part. I mean, if their family was wiped out by Europeans and suddenly one of them marries one, there's going to be a problem. It would be in our own society would have that issue too. I don't know of any cases I can think of, but they have to be there.
Thank you, Chief. It was a great presentation. Thank you so much for doing this today. It was great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Chief Paul. It's Gigi.
Oh, hi, Gigi.
Thank you so much. We had the whole family around the breakfast table watching your presentation. And we also have recently, the teacher of her school, of her child's school, did a presentation on the Walla Walla Indians and the Whitman. And Dr. Whitman, it was all one-sided. There was nothing about the Native Americans' point of view. And I actually called the Whitman historical place and got confirmation that a lot of facts that were being told were incorrect. So my plan, this is where I'm seeing all this is all one-sided. As you had said, it's all presented one-sided and no one's hearing our point of view on what happened.
Yeah.
So I'm planning to go to the school board and have them, but that's an influence of what you've presented to us to get us all motivated to go. So thank you.
You're welcome. Now, the same thing happens with any losers. The victors write the history. Mm-hmm. And that's where it gets wrong. It's tilted in that direction. And like my loyalists, it's tilted that direction. When the English came in and took over the Acadians, it's tilted in their direction. So, the same thing with the Indians when they got taken over, the history is written in their the victors. So it's almost a natural thing that they paint their history books that way, and getting it evenly projected for education, that's what the number one priority should be.
Paul, I just have a quick question. In researching one's Native American ancestry, is there any particular starting point that you would recommend first, as opposed to,
the number one rule is, and it is with our regular genealogy that we do, is you start with yourself and you work your way back, and then you start looking for these little key things. If you're looking just for Native American, you're looking for those little keys In fact, just to show you something similar, I've got Huntington's in my family. And it's just a devastating disease. It's awful. And I've got aunts and uncles that got it, and some of the children now have got it, my cousins. And it's really bad. And so far, it has not shown up in my family, which we've been lucky in my dad's line. But the thing is, to help my aunt, the first one that came down with it, diagnosed with it, they were taking research, and I kind of went off to the side. And this is during my Falmouth days too. I was doing this research at that time when we lived on the Cape. And I helped my cousin out to try to find out what happened to her mother. How did, where did this come from? Because it was still fairly new in my family. So what I did is I actually tackled that disease in my family by genealogy. I wanted to find out where it came from. So I started doing the research backwards. And then I started finding out that on my Kelly side, the Irish, there was one woman that was labeled, and she was a direct ancestor, my great-great-grandmother, was labeled insane. And then when they showed up to take the kids away in the Boston courts with her husband, which was a Bunnell, they said she was drunk. Well, these are all the signs of Huntington's. You slur and you have spastic movements. You can't control your muscles, and you're not there. But back then, early 1900s, they just said she was unfit, got rid of her. And then she actually died in the hospital, going, what they said, insane. And then some of her children did that, and that's where it came from. Then I got a hold of her parents, and there wasn't anything there. And that kid came over on the boat in 1848 with the potato famine, and they went on to Vermont for a short time, worked the quarries. But his father, this was James Kelly. The father was James Kelly. And when they came across in the Channing in 1848 to Ellis Island, which wasn't there then, but when they came over, there were suspicions there because that father was murdered in New York and was killed. And I thought, there's another sign of violence, because the Huntingtons will have violent tendencies too. And I don't know what happened there, but I traced it back to Ireland. And I found out that the man that was killed, my great-great-great-grandfather, was on the property of Macon, I forget, it was Roscommon, Ireland, the county Roscommon. And they were living along the river in mud huts. I mean, it was just very poor conditions. There were potato famine, the farmers, I mean. And sure, when they had an uprising, he got with his father, and they went to the landlord. Everything was landlord run, and all the peasants lived on that landlord's property. And then when the time was really bad, they went to that property and killed the landlord. And then that's how they ended up coming to America. They had to get the heck out of town. So there was all this going on, and they discovered that his actions were not right either, and they weren't right in New York, and then somebody killed him. So I kind of traced that line that went right to my Kellys, that I think that's where my Huntingtons, because no other line, the Bunnell line or nothing, had anything out of the ordinary. But in the Kelly line, there was all these relatives that came down with illnesses that are mental, that there was a problem. And that's
interesting.
Huntingtons.
Very much so.
And I do the same thing with the native lanes. You look, if you're looking for one particular thing, like in the case of native, you look for what they were doing: basket making, snowshoe making, canoes, all those different kind of things. And then when you speak to the people applying for the for the membership, you find out what they were doing in a lot of cases as living. They'll come out and they'll tell you, oh, well, we made this for something, you know, or we went out and used tea off the bark of some trees, things like this. And those are all Indian type of things, or we made maple syrup and we've done it for 100 years or something. And those are lines that I will follow in that family line and shoot it out in that direction until finally you hit a native. So it's just investigate.
I'm going to, I think a good thing for me to do is to allow us to have a time where we're not recorded, okay? And so I want to, just so we can visit, so I want to give a little, close the YouTube live stream here, but just say that the next talk in our monthly series will be given by professional genealogist and FGS member Dave Robeson. Anyone involved in genealogy in New England knows of Dave Robeson and his extensive contribution. His talk is titled, "It's More Than Ancestry and Family Search," which looks at some of the other very useful online resources in addition to Ancestry.com and FamilySearch.org. It's the genealogy meat, or actually vegetables if you prefer, that we all need. And this next talk will not be on our normal date, but will be on Thursday, June 10th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time via Zoom. You can find more information about it at our website, falgen.org. And as Jerry said earlier, just be aware that you're all the members, FGS members, are going to get emails and so forth regarding our coming annual voting process for, you'll see society reports, we'll vote for officers and a budget. So all of you members be aware that's coming up in your mailboxes. Some of you will get physical mail on that too. I'm not going to take the time. I wanted to say some more about our team Zoom team up sessions where we help each other with problems. Just go to our website if you have questions or problems you would like some help from any of us FGS members. This team up Zoom session, that's the way to do it. And we've already had 5 of them and there have been lots of fun. So that is it. So I'm going to end our, if I can figure out how to do it here, end our